Hello, I'm Ron Franklin for Bassmasters Classic Yearbook. The thrill of watching professional fishing only intensifies when the field narrows down to that final face-off for the championship. In 1988, the Bassmasters Classic ended with a shootout between the hometown hero and a mountain man from Missouri. Two individuals fishing with two different styles, both of them seeking the same ultimate goal.
I always enjoy the aesthetics that water has to offer, and the James is certainly a beautiful river.
And yeah, it's pretty special, especially in practice when you have time to think. There's lots of stuff goes through your mind. I mean, what could have happened here where I'm catching this little old bass and things like that.
You talk about the James River and you talk about fishing and you talk about enjoying the aesthetics of the river and what the river has to offer, but at classic time, it's strictly business.
As I call your name, crank the engine and move out. Lonnie Stanley.
In 1988 on the James River, the hot topic was tidal fishing.
The main factor for us was dealing with tides. Back at that point in time, most of us that were fishing that did not have a lot of experience on tidal waters.
And the James is tidal influence, which means that conditions can change every 6 hours when the tide makes its movement from falling tide to high tide.
There's two theories in fishing tidal water, and the main one and the dominant one is to run the tide.
A lot of people don't understand that when it's low on one end of the river, it's high on the other end. And it kind of reverses around like that. So if you say you want to fish low tide and you were on the lower end of the river at 8 o'clock in the morning, you could work your way right on up the river and keep fishing low tide conditions.
Really, most of us that were lake fishermen, that was very difficult to do. Most of us, and myself, my approach was actually to just find a good area. And when the tide was so-called perfect, then you definitely needed to be where you thought the key areas was. But when the tide was not perfect, then you really had to do things just to try to catch an extra fish here and there.
And that's really the way I prefer to fish a tidal body of water, is to find me an area and figure out what the fish are doing on both tides and just make the adjustments myself rather than make a water location adjustments.
I can't think of anybody that understands a tide more than Woo Days. If there's somebody else out there, I don't know who it is.
Everybody in the whole arena felt like Woo Days from Chester, Virginia, was a shoe-in to win this.
People just don't understand how much pressure goes on you when you fish on your home water and how much tougher it is.
The same thing happened to me when they came to the Arkansas River and I was in the Classic. I was supposed to win, so all the newspaper writers, outdoor writers, they're all focused on you, and you're supposed to win. And Woo was supposed to win the James River. The
press was just, it was unreal. The newspapers every day, and then when he was doing good, then it got escalated even more.
I fished the last day with Woo, and we probably hit 50 different places, and I got a first-hand look at the technique called junk fishing.
Woo is what I call one of the best slop fishermen there is. It's just a term, it's not a criticism. In some ways, I at times slop fish. What I mean by that is you go to an area and you throw everything in the tackle box at the potential fish in the area. Woo would pitch a worm, then he'd pitch a crankbait, then he'd throw a spinnerbait, and then boom, he'd be off and he'd run in the tide to the next area, and then he just throws a whole tackle box at him there, and then he runs to another area. And that is Woo's style.
I think he looks at fishing much like the carpenter looks at a job. What tools does it take to do it?
He used to use a Zebco or something like that, a push button, you know, a closed face reel. And I used to always make fun of him whenever he drug that thing. I always said, hey man, how you doing with your 202, you know?
Well, I used 808. Actually, that's how I won the tournament on the Illinois River, flipping with it.
He made it work. I'm not real sure Woo wasn't one of the first skippers that I ever seen, and he done it with that Zebco push button reel.
Again, that's back to junk fishing. You got to do what you got to do to catch fish.
You know, I'm a good fisherman, but I'm not as good as Nixon. I used to say that Larry had scales on his butt, but you know, and he's just a great, great fisherman. He can win any of them.
15 pounds and 11 ounces.
During the year leading up to the 1988 Classic, Larry Nixon made professional fishing history by winning over $250,000.
If you're going to have a so-called fishing hero, he was kind of mine all along just because of the way he conducted himself, and the role he got on back then with all those Megabucks wins, and that was phenomenal.
Where he made his mark was when Bass came up with the idea of a concept called Megabucks. It was a 6-day enduro battle where you had to qualify down to 10 anglers at the end, and they would fish a tournament laid out course, much like a golf course.
I feared nobody when I went into those kind of finals, with the exception of Larry. I knew he was just as strong as I was mentally, and that he thrived in those kind of events just like I did.
Mark it, 12 pounds even, and that gives him the victory. There's your man right there, folks. That's the bass that did it.
But this one particular scene, I can see it play back now. Larry hooks this big fish. You see the fish over Larry's shoulder, 7 or 8 pound fish come up. He turns and looks at the camera. He says, "Oh my gosh, look at the size of that bass." And then turns back around and plays it down and lands it. It's that great little bit of special television that'll always live in my mind.
We had some tournaments where he absolutely humbled a lot of people, and gosh, he won a lot of money in a short period of time and became Bass's all-time leading money winner back then. And I've got a tremendous amount of respect, not only for what he did back then, but how he's carried it through over the years.
And here for the 4th time, this is going to give him, folks, nearly $500,000 winnings on just the Megabucks tournaments alone.
You know, he was the first man ever to top the $1 million mark. That year, he was God just smiled on him, and he did everything right. It came up roses.
Larry got in that zone because he was really in tune with what he was doing, and he stayed on the water a lot. He concentrated on fishing.
I know when I was doing super well in competition, I was also fishing a lot. You know, I was fishing 250 days a year. And for the last 10 years, I probably hadn't fished 120, 130 days a year. So I think that's got a lot to do with it too. You just can't keep that edge for every tournament unless you get to spend a lot of time on the water. It's hard to say what makes them streaks go good. Sometimes it's just everything's falling your way.
While Larry Nixon was winning big money, Rick Clunn and Guido Higdon were quietly fishing their way into contention for Angler of the Year. These two good friends found themselves in a face-off going into the season's final event.
First thing you know, all of a sudden, it's Ricky and I were having us one.
I can easily say that Guido was one of the people that I liked the most, not just respected, because I respect a lot of guys in tournaments that I don't like, but not only do I respect Guido, I like Guido.
Ricky and I have never had a crossword. If I have an extremely close friend, I mean, Ricky's it.
And so to be competing against him was kind of an honor in a way, and yet it was kind of sad in a way.
When you get down to these great fishermen and it's down to one tournament, it almost is unfair to see one of them win or not, but that's the way the sport is.
It's hard to win Angler of the Year. I mean, you fight all year long to put yourself in that position to win. You can't have a bad day.
And my first day was just so and Guido had a pretty good first day. And of course, my dad is there, and I get out of the boat and weigh in and come in, and he says, "You know, son, you're getting your ass kicked." But as it turned out, I ended up pulling it out at that event anyway.
I can still remember, passing him and walking off that dock the last day. And I looked at his bag and I knew, well, this one's history, that's for sure. But we shook hands and all it was said, basically, was he said, "You'll win the Classic this year."
Guido Higdon is probably my favorite fisherman on the circuit. I just like his courage, I like his style.
Fishing to him is fun, and he wants to keep it that way, and he thinks everybody else should enjoy it as much as he does.
Guido doesn't fish to be famous. He doesn't fish for glory. He fishes because he loves it.
It's kind of crazy, but Dad's been the 900-pound gorilla forever. My dad's not afraid of saying anything to anybody. There's nobody bigger than my dad as far as in life. I think the Pope could walk in and he'd just talk to him just like he talks to me and you.
Well, Guido Higdon is, and he won't like this when I say it, but Guido's kind of I'm gonna call him the father of bass fishing.
Guido had that knack for taking young fellows under his wing and kind of teaching them things that they needed to know about being a pro fisherman that may have had nothing to do with fishing itself.
A lot of the older guys, they're not, they'll make you earn your rookie strike. They'll take advantage of you or they'll whatnot, but Guido was different. He'd put his arm around you and he'd give you some advice, be it with fishing or with sponsors. He'd lead you straight. He was more like a father figure.
Being a father figure isn't all that bad. I mean, I can scold them and they take it. And I get along with most everybody. If I don't get along with somebody, the bad part is I usually tell them.
Guido's not bashful about walking up and telling a young man, hey, you done something today that it's not acceptable. You need to change. What
you get with Guido is Guido. You don't get anything else. If he doesn't like you, he doesn't like you. If he likes you, he'll do anything for you.
This sounds kind of corny. I mean, it's the way this is all going, but it doesn't hurt to teach people at all. Gosh, if I'm going to be remembered after I'm gone for doing something, my gosh, I'd like to be remembered as a nice guy, not somebody that kept everything to themselves.
He's very willing to give his knowledge. You can see that in his son. I admire the way he's tutored his son, because I know as a father that's the hardest thing in the world to do, is to give your child your knowledge without shoving it down their throat and actually making them resent it.
The Higdons as a whole, I think, they really have a passion for this sport, and for Guido as a father to teach Dion the things that he's taught him and to see him prosper in the sport's got to be really, really rewarding to him, and it's quite a compliment to Guido.
In 1988, the Bassmasters Classic became a family event for Guido Higdon when both Guido and his son Dion qualified to compete.
Oh, obviously there's a lot of pride there because you know what it takes to qualify for that event. And when your son qualifies for that event, you're all puffed up, and it's a very successful event anyway.
Having Dion in the Classic for the first time was great.
Well, we really got excited then because we knew that if we could make it, both of us together, and go to the Classic waters together, we could actually maybe figure this thing out where one of us could win the thing.
My dad's, he's my father, but all in the same respects, he's my best friend because we have traveled and run the road together for 17, 18 years now.
There isn't any secrets at all between Dion and I. That's the neat thing about a father-son.
We've never done anything, him do one thing, me do something else. We've always done it together, and so we're very, very close, the whole family is.
It's nice to have them both there. It's very nerve-wracking, I'll tell you that, because you don't know who to pull for, and you want to pull for both of them, and it can get real interesting at times.
It was tough on him to fish because, especially after the first day, because I led the thing after the first day. I know because I would look up every now and then, hear a boat, I'd look up and it would be him coming to check on me.
Yeah, I came back and checked on him, but I didn't go into where he was at. I just came back and made sure that I seen him come out of there.
It was just a tough tournament. It was tough on him, really, really tough on him because he couldn't fish. He done his very best to do what he could, but he couldn't fish for worrying about me.
As I look back on it, I had very little experience in that type of situation, and the glitz and the glamour really got me, and that's fine. The first-timers that go to the Classic, they're all going to have that, and you should have that. You should be excited about it.
I think one of the interesting things about Guido Higdon is the lure he has called a Guido Bug.
Dion invented it and Guido made it famous. And it's kind of funny because it was a school project.
I had a school project deal that I had to make something. You could make it out of anything. You could make it out of paper mache, you could make it out of clay, you could do anything. Well, we'd always made molds for different things. And I thought, well, I'll just make a crawdad. You know, I can make a plaster Paris mold and pour rubber crawdad.
Knowing Guido now, I'm sure when he started that, he probably picked it up and said, hey, and held it in his hand and said, hey, I know what I can do with this.
So they started melting plastic worms, pouring them into the plaster Paris mold, and that's how the Guido Bug was developed.
It just took off from there. We've caught them on it forever. It's still one of those baits you still catch a lot of fish on, you know, every year.
Man, it revolutionized jig fishing. From then on, people stopped using pork. I'm sure Uncle Josh hates him, but...
You know, there's so many little things that have to take place for you to win it. You know, number one, you have to be on top of your game. You can't miss any fish. Then you have to outthink every one of the competitors. You got to be a little bit on edge, a little bit above them. You know, make sure that you make the moves right and don't zig when you should have zagged. And you know, when you do everything right, then there it is, a classic champion right there.
Guido was doing what most of us lake fishermen were doing. He had found an area and he was sticking with it.
I decided that I would not worry about what the tide was, that I would fish the fish. And no matter where it was or what it was, that's what I had to fish, and I would try to figure out how to make them bite.
Guido picked a creek and stayed in that creek, and he just thoroughly fished that creek with a jig and a Guido Bug crawfish trailer.
But I picked the smallest, the hardest to get into place that I could find on the James River. It was almost a suicidal run to go to it and then to try to get back in it.
If you had to diagram a perfect place for a bass to hide under low water conditions, he had it.
In contrast, Wu was doing his typical run and gun style, where he might hit 60 or 80 spots, kind of junk fishing throughout the river.
I remember Wu fished every duck blind on the James River. I don't care where it was, Wu had a duck blind pattern going, and he was everywhere. I bet he burned more gas on that river than you would going from North Carolina to California by water. He was everywhere.
Guido's the most patient person fishing in the world. He can fish for 45 minutes on one limb of one tree and then catch a 5-pounder off of it.
If he goes down a bank fishing, there's no need to go behind him, because he's going to probably turn around and come back up and go back down it again. I just have a different style of fishing from him. He's going to make that fish bite. He's going to work it, give it the proper presentation, everything. I'm going to go up there and do what I think I need to do to catch. If it doesn't work, I'm gone. He's kind of the turtle and I'm the hare.
You had two, totally different styles of fishing going on. And really the question would be, which style of fishing you would think would be conducive to pulling it out when the race was that close going in the last day.
The final day of the Classic changes one man's life forever. His destiny is forever altered because of a little green fish.
They always bring the winner in last. They always had in the previous years. And we're down to Guido and Wu. I'm holding my breath to see who it is. Well, then they call Guido's name.
I said this the first day that I had a feeling you'd win this tournament, Guido.
I hope you're right.
Watch the scales, folks. We may have a new leader. 11 pounds, 0 ounces. Let's give him a good hand. There you go. Pick up 2 bass and show these folks. He has pulled into the lead with 29 pounds and 1 ounce, a new leader.
There was no doubt who the fans were rooting for when you'd come in to weigh in.
The whole place was just roaring and screaming for Wu.
Wu Day is the only man that can beat Guido Higdon. He's got to have 8 pounds and 13 ounces to win.
When all this kind of started dawning on me that things were really, really closed was whenever I seen Wu take his 5th fish out of the live well.
He's got to have a big fish. He'll never make it without a three-pounder.
But whenever Wu took the 5th fish out, I mean, old Ricky reached and slapped me on the back. And he said, "You just won you a classic."
Wu, you've got to have 8 pounds and 13 ounces to take the lead away from Guido Higdon. He's got his limit, Governor. We'll let the governor call it. I'm not going to call it. But you've got to have 8:13 to beat Guido Higdon, otherwise he's our champion.
8 pounds, 6 ounces.
He missed it. Guido Higdon is our champion of the Bassmasters Classic.
And then I lost it. I'd done more than my fair share of crying that day. My son had to help me out of the stands and down onto the floor. I don't think I would have made it otherwise. It was just one happy day.
And yet at the same time, I felt for Wu because he was very emotional. He felt like he let a lot of his support down, you know, at that event.
You know, I wanted to win naturally, but I wasn't the best. I didn't do the best, so I didn't have any excuses there. My fans let me know, even though I came in second, and friends, that I didn't let them down, you know. I kind of felt like I did.
Let's give Wu one big hand, folks.
After it was all over, said and done, I mean, yeah, it was hard on Wu, but he was the first one to hug my neck, that's for sure.
It was complete bliss for the whole Higdon clan. I mean, it was just unreal. And just the fact that I got to be there and participate in it was just crazy, you know, how much fun it was.
And I'll never forget, Guido's a quite spoken individual with a gravelly voice. And he couldn't control his emotions, and at the weigh-in, you could see the big tear roll down his eyes. It was truly a great victory for a great fisherman.
It was one of those deals where I'd been so close so many times. And whenever you get in that boat and you ride around that arena, you know, holding that flag up, God, I mean, that's pretty special.
Usually, the winning of bass fishing's premier event is followed by a year-long non-stop tour of appearances, seminars, and endorsements. But Guido's year took a different path. Just 2 weeks after winning the Bassmasters Classic, Guido suffered a heart attack and was forced to spend time at home in recovery. But he came back with a vengeance in 1990, winning the Angler of the Year award. And just to prove a point, he won it again in 1991. For Bassmasters Classic Yearbook, I'm Ron Franklin.